Mountain Monsters has investigated hundreds of locations, faced bears, dangerous terrain, extreme weather, but one episode never aired. September 2019, deep in Kentucky mountains hunting the Yahoo. Something went horribly wrong. The crew was attacked. Not scared. Attacked. Wild Bill hit by rock, cracked rib. Huckleberry grabbed and thrown 5 feet. Marcus's arm slashed, 3 parallel cuts. 4 crew members hospitalized in one night. All captured on camera. Subscribe because Travel Channel banned this episode permanently. The footage is too violent, too real, too disturbing for television. Creatures charged them. Physical contact. Documented injuries. Medical records prove it. This wasn't entertainment. This was survival. The most violent cryptid encounter ever filmed, and the network decided you should never see it. This is what really happened during the banned Mountain Monsters episode, and why some hunts aren't worth the risk. Devil's Creek Hollow sits in the remote mountains of Pike County, eastern Kentucky, deep in Appalachian territory. The area is accessible only by rough logging roads that wind through dense forest. Steep ridges surround the hollow. Cave systems penetrate the mountains. The nearest town is 40 minutes away on treacherous roads. Cell phone service doesn't exist. The local population is sparse and secretive about what lives in those mountains. The Yahoo is a regional cryptid reported for generations across Appalachia. Unlike the typically shy Pacific Northwest Bigfoot, the Yahoo is known for extreme territorial aggression. Described as 7 to 8 feet tall and covered in reddish-brown hair, it's blamed for multiple livestock killings over decades. Several hunters have reported being chased from the area. One hunter was hospitalized in the 1990s after an encounter, though he refused to discuss details. Locals genuinely fear Devil's Creek Hollow. Many won't enter after dark. In August 2019, multiple recent sightings reached the Ames team. A local farmer's cattle were mutilated in ways that didn't match bear or cougar attacks. Strange vocalizations were recorded by campers. Massive tracks measuring 19 inches were found near the creek. Elaborate tree structures appeared overnight. The pattern suggested an active, aggressive creature. Desperate locals contacted Mountain Monsters directly, asking for help. Before the investigation began, warning signs appeared. Local residents warned the team repeatedly, "Don't go up there after dark. That thing don't run from people. It hunts people." Most significantly, a Native American elder visited their base camp. "You're making a mistake," he told Buck directly. "This one is different. It's territorial and violent. You should leave." The team dismissed the warnings as superstition and local fear. The full Ames team deployed for the investigation. Buck Lowe led as team leader. Wild Bill, Huckleberry, Jeff Headley, and Willie McQuillian comprised the core team. The production crew totaled 8 people, including multiple camera operators, a sound technician, and a producer on site. They brought complete equipment: thermal imaging, night vision, audio recorders, trail cameras, and communication gear. The investigation plan covered 3 nights. Night 1 for reconnaissance and evidence gathering. Night 2 for building traps and setting cameras. Night 3 for active hunting. Base camp was established at the hollow's entrance. Teams would split coverage for efficiency and coordinate via radio. Medical kits were on standby as standard procedure. From the beginning, the atmosphere felt wrong. Wild Bill commented immediately, "This place feels wrong." The forest was unnaturally quiet with no bird sounds or insect noise. An oppressive feeling hung in the air. Even experienced crew members felt nervous. But Buck decided to proceed. "We've handled worse," he said confidently. They hadn't handled anything like what was waiting for them in Devil's Creek Hollow. At 8 p.m., the team split into 2 groups. Buck, Wild Bill, and Willie headed north toward the ridge. Huckleberry, Jeff, and a camera operator took the south approach through the valley. The producer and remaining crew stayed at base camp. Radio check confirmed communication was working. The sun was setting fast in the hollow and temperature was dropping rapidly. Everyone felt uneasy but proceeded anyway. By 8:45, Buck's team discovered massive footprints crossing a muddy section near the creek. The prints measured 19 inches long with 5 distinct toes. Deep impressions suggested something weighing over 600 pounds. The stride length indicated 7 to 8 foot steps between prints, too large for human, too humanoid for bear. Buck examined them closely. "These are the biggest I've ever seen, and they're fresh, maybe within the last hour." At 9:15, they found elaborate tree structures, 8-foot logs stacked deliberately in patterns, fresh breaks on branches, saplings bent and woven together. These structures were far more complex than typical Bigfoot markers. They suggested high intelligence and very recent activity. Something built this today, Buck said quietly. The realization was unsettling. The first unusual occurrence came at 9:30. Loud crashing sounds erupted from the brush approximately 50 yards from the team. Something large was moving parallel to their position, keeping pace as they walked. Wild Bill stopped the team. Something's tracking us. They listened carefully. The crashing stopped immediately when they stopped. When the team resumed walking, the sounds resumed, matching their pace exactly. By 9:50, deep guttural howls echoed from the ridge above them. The sound was unlike any animal they recognized. Not bear, not cougar, not coyote. Before they could process it, a second howl answered from the opposite direction. The team realized with growing dread that they were positioned between at least two of them. Huckleberry's team radioed that they were hearing the same vocalizations coming from multiple directions around their position. "They're communicating about us," Jeff said nervously. Huckleberry scanned with the thermal camera at 10:10. Multiple large heat signatures appeared on the screen, at least 3, possibly 4 distinct sources. They were moving in a coordinated pattern, staying just outside clear visual range at approximately 200 yards out. The signatures were circling both teams systematically. "They're surrounding us," Huckleberry reported over radio, his voice tense. Buck made an immediate decision. He radioed both teams. "Everyone back to base camp. Slow and steady, stay together." This wasn't panic, but tactical retreat. He didn't want teams separated with coordinated creatures watching their every move. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., the team settled into camp for the night. Tents were set up in a clearing with the generator running to power lights and equipment. A perimeter was established with portable lights. Buck and Wild Bill took the first watch while the rest of the team tried to sleep. The forest remained eerily quiet, with no normal night sounds whatsoever. At 1:15 a.m., the generator suddenly died. All lights went out immediately, plunging the camp into complete darkness. Buck went to investigate and found the fuel line deliberately cut with a clean slice, not animal damage. "Someone or something sabotaged this," he announced. The team went on high alert immediately. Within minutes, flashlights revealed multiple sets of eyes reflecting from the tree line. They completely surrounded the camp from at least 5 or 6 positions. The eyes were 8 to 9 feet off the ground, far too high for any normal animal. They just watched without approaching. The team armed themselves and formed a defensive circle. The eyes would disappear when flashlights pointed directly at them, then reappear in different locations. They were moving around the perimeter, testing the camp's response. This was intelligent, calculated behavior. "They're hunting us," Wild Bill said quietly, "testing our defenses." At 1:35, large rocks began being thrown into camp from multiple directions. The rocks landed near tents but weren't hitting anyone deliberately. This was intimidation. One rock the size of a softball landed 3 feet from a camera operator. The crew was starting to panic. At 1:42, camera operator Marcus went to his tent to grab equipment. The team heard him scream, "Something grabbed me!" Everyone rushed over to find Marcus pale and shaking violently. 3 parallel scratches ran down his arm, bleeding. He explained that something had grabbed his arm from outside the tent and pulled him backward. The grip was incredibly strong. He pulled free and saw a massive hand covered in dark hair before it disappeared. The medic examined Marcus immediately. The scratches were 3 parallel marks, 4 inches long each, deep enough to draw blood. The spacing suggested a very large hand, not bear claws, not human nails, something in between. The team pulled everyone into the center of camp. No one was allowed near the perimeter. Buck tried to radio for extraction, but communications were dead. The satellite phone was also not working. They were completely cut off from the outside with no way to call for help. The generator was sabotaged. Communications were disabled. They were surrounded by multiple intelligent creatures showing coordinated behavior and willingness to make physical contact. From 2 a.m. until 5:15, when dawn finally broke, the team huddled together. Constant sounds came from the perimeter, heavy footsteps circling, breathing audible in the darkness. Occasional glimpses of massive figures moving just beyond the light. No one slept. Everyone was terrified. When first light came, the creatures melted back into the forest. Examination of the perimeter revealed dozens of massive footprints surrounding the entire camp. They had been playing with the team all night. Morning daylight revealed the full extent of the night's events. The generator fuel line showed a deep, deliberate slash. Multiple equipment items were moved, knocked over, or damaged. Food supplies were scattered across camp. The message was clear: we can reach anything. Footprint casts were made from the clearest prints. They measured 18 to 20 inches long, with depth suggesting 500 to 700 pounds. At least 6 different sets were identified. proving multiple individuals working together in coordinated patterns around the camp. Marcus's scratches were cleaned, bandaged, and photographed extensively. The spacing between marks measured 3 inches. The depth was a 1/4 inch into his skin. Pattern analysis showed 4 fingers plus thumb with a hand span of 9 to 10 inches minimum. This was consistent with a massive humanoid hand, not any known animal. The producer called for medical extraction for Marcus. Marcus refused to leave. "I'm not going through those woods alone, and you need the camera crew." He stayed despite being clearly traumatized, jumping at every sound. Buck called an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. Should they continue or abort? Arguments for leaving included the physical attack, crew injury, and seriously compromised safety. Arguments for staying included only 1 night remaining, incredible evidence already captured, and the belief that daylight hours should be safe. The production company via satellite phone pressured them to continue. "Can you make it 1 more night?" Buck reluctantly agreed, but set strict conditions. Everyone stays together. No split teams, no one goes anywhere alone, full perimeter lighting, backup generator, weapons loaded and ready. At first sign of danger, immediate extraction. We're not risking lives for footage. During daylight, Jeff and Huckleberry, scouting near camp, found a cave system 200 yards away. Large openings with fresh tracks leading inside. A massive nest of branches inside the entrance. "We camped right in their territory," Jeff realized. This explained the aggressive territorial behavior. The creatures were defending their home. That made the coming night even more dangerous. At 7:30 p.m., the entire team deployed together. No split teams this time. Full lighting perimeter was active with the backup generator running. All cameras were positioned. The team formed a defensive formation and waited. Anxiety was extremely high. For the first hour and a half, nothing happened. The silence was too quiet, unnatural, no forest sounds at all. The team was on edge, waiting for something. The calm before the storm feeling was palpable. At 9:15, a massive figure stepped into the light range at the edge of the perimeter. 9 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown hair with a muscular build. It stood completely still, staring directly at the team for nearly 3 minutes. This was challenge behavior. Then it stepped back into darkness and disappeared. Between 9:20 and 10 p.m., different creatures appeared at different positions around the perimeter. They showed themselves briefly, then vanished. This was coordinated display, establishing dominance. "There's at least 5 of them," Buck counted. At 10:15, large rocks were suddenly thrown from multiple directions simultaneously. Dozens of them hit tents and equipment. One destroyed a camera. Another grazed the sound technician's shoulder. This was a coordinated attack. At 10:18, a rock the size of a baseball hit Wild Bill's back between his shoulder blades. He went down hard. The team rushed to him as he lay conscious but unable to breathe properly. Rocks were still being thrown all around them. Someone yelled, "Get to the vehicles!" Buck shouted, "Everyone move, now!" They grabbed Wild Bill and began retreating. At 10:22, as the team moved toward vehicles, a massive creature charged from the tree line. 8 feet tall and enormous, it ran directly at them. The team scattered. Huckleberry tripped and fell. The creature was heading straight for him. The creature reached Huckleberry, grabbed his backpack, and lifted him completely off the ground. It threw him 5 feet through the air. Huckleberry hit the ground hard. The creature stood over him as Huckleberry screamed. Buck fired his gun into the air. The gunshot made the creature pause. It looked at Buck, made a decision, then released Huckleberry. It backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact with Buck, then turned and disappeared into darkness within seconds. The team grabbed Huckleberry. He was conscious but terrified, his back injured from being thrown. Wild Bill was still in severe pain. "Get in the trucks now!" Everyone ran, abandoning all equipment. Their only goal was getting out alive. They reached the vehicles and piled in frantically. Engines started. The headlights revealed multiple large figures watching them leave. The creatures didn't pursue. Their mission was accomplished. Territory defended. The team escaped at 10:28 p.m., speeding down the mountain road, leaving everything behind. 2 crew members were seriously injured. The most violent encounter mountain monsters ever documented was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The 2 trucks sped down mountain roads for 40 minutes to reach Pike County Medical Center. Everyone was silent except for groans of pain. Wild Bill could barely breathe. Huckleberry's back was seizing up. Marcus's scratches were bleeding through his bandage. The sound technician's shoulder was swelling rapidly. At 11:15 p.m., they reached the emergency room. 4 team members required immediate treatment. Wild Bill was taken for x-rays. His diagnosis: cracked rib with severe bruising across his back showing impact pattern consistent with a large rock. The doctor said, "You're lucky it's not worse. That rock hit with serious force." He was prescribed pain medication and restricted from activity for 2 weeks. Huckleberry's examination revealed severe lower back strain, possible herniated disc, and whiplash from being thrown. Bruising covered his shoulders and back where the creature grabbed him. The bruises were handprint-shaped, measuring 10 to 11 inches in span, much larger than any human hand. Medical staff photographed and measured them, confused about what could have grabbed him with such force. Marcus's scratches showed signs of infection 24 hours later. Antibiotics were prescribed. The wounds were deeper than initially thought. The 3 parallel marks would scar permanently, leaving him with proof of what attacked him. The producer arrived at the hospital with network executives on conference call. They discussed liability concerns, insurance questions, and legal implications. 4 injured crew members with documented physical attacks created serious complications. Willie reviewed the footage in the hospital waiting room. The rock throwing was clearly visible. The creature charging Huckleberry was captured on camera. Physical contact was documented. Huckleberry being thrown was visible. The creature standing over him was filmed. "This is the most violent encounter ever filmed," Willie said quietly. Network executives immediately expressed concern. This went beyond entertainment. People were genuinely hurt. Do we air this? Legal teams began reviewing footage. Insurance companies started investigating. OSHA became potentially involved. The evidence was undeniable, but the question became, what should be done about it? Network lawyers reviewed all footage and identified multiple liability issues. Crew members were injured during production, making the company potentially liable. Workers' compensation claims were likely. OSHA violations were possible. The insurance company denied coverage, invoking acts of nature exclusions. Legal exposure was too great. The violence factor was unprecedented. This episode showed real physical attacks, not implied danger. Actual documented violence with people genuinely hurt on camera. This was different from typical Mountain Monsters content. It crossed the line from investigation to assault. Network standards determined it was too intense for television. Travel Channel's brand image was at stake. The network was known for paranormal entertainment, not graphic violence. This episode showed people being attacked, injured seriously, and traumatized psychologically. Sponsors might object. The reputation could be damaged. It didn't fit their brand. Internal ethical debates questioned whether profiting from crew injuries was exploitation. The team went through genuine trauma for entertainment purposes. Was it ethical to broadcast that? The network chose ethics over potential profit. Buck initially wanted the episode to air. People need to see what's out there. This is proof. But after reflection, he changed his mind. My team got hurt. Marcus, Wild Bill, Huckleberry injured. Maybe some things aren't worth proving. He supported the network's decision. Team members' views were divided. Some wanted evidence shown. We went through that. People should see. Others were traumatized. I don't want to relive it. Don't want my pain as entertainment. Huckleberry especially opposed airing footage of being physically attacked and thrown. Too personal, too traumatic. In November 2019, Travel Channel officially banned the episode. It will never air on television. Footage was archived but not destroyed, kept from the public. Team members signed NDAs about specific details. The general story could be discussed, but not graphic footage details. The network issued a vague public statement. Due to production complications, the episode will not air. No specifics were given. Fans speculated wildly and rumors spread, but the truth remained hidden until now. In March 2020, an anonymous crew member posted on Reddit claiming to have worked on Mountain Monsters. They described the Kentucky incident. Crew was attacked. People got hurt. Episode banned. The post was deleted quickly, but screenshots spread everywhere. Hospital records leaked online with names redacted, but injuries documented. 4 patients treated the same night from incident at Devil's Creek Hollow. Cracked rib, back injury, lacerations. This corroborated the Reddit post. Proof something really happened. A small Pike County newspaper article from September 2019 was found. Television crew injured during filming. 4 transported to hospital. Wildlife encounter suspected. The article confirmed the date and location, matching all leaked information. Wild Bill posted cryptically in October 2019. Sometimes the hunt hunts you back. Huckleberry went dark on social media for 3 months. Marcus left Mountain Monsters permanently, never returning to the crew. The trauma was too severe. Buck Lowe was never the same after Kentucky. He became more cautious as a leader, questioning every investigation. Is this worth risking my team? He won't ignore warnings anymore. The elder told them not to go. They should have listened. Wild Bill's rib healed within months, but psychological impact remained. He's more hesitant on investigations now, constantly checking surroundings. That night changed me. Realize these things can kill us. We're not invincible. Huckleberry's back problems persist years later. He required physical therapy for months and still has occasional pain. The handprint bruises took weeks to fade, but the memory never fades. Being grabbed by that thing, thrown like I weighed nothing, that strength was inhuman. He focuses on technology now, keeping distance. I've been close enough. Don't need to experience that again. Marcus never returned to paranormal work. He took camera jobs on nature documentaries. I'm done with cryptids. Almost died in those woods. He can't watch mountain monsters anymore without triggering anxiety attacks. Mountain monsters protocols were completely overhauled. Enhanced safety measures, medical personnel on every shoot, satellite phones mandatory, emergency extraction plans required, hazard assessments before each hunt. The banned episode changed how the show operates permanently. The episode remains banned with no plans to ever release it despite fan demand. Legal reasons remain valid. Footage exists in a vault with heavily restricted access. Only lawyers and executives have seen it. What we know for certain: 4 crew members injured, medical records documented. Physical attacks occurred and were captured on camera. The episode was completed. Network chose not to air it. The ban remains in effect. This was the most violent encounter the show ever documented. The lesson learned: not all cryptids are passive. Some are territorial and violent. Yahoos are different from typical Bigfoot. Warnings should be heeded. Safety over evidence. People over profit. Some hunts should be abandoned. Devil's Creek Hollow remains off limits. Mountain monsters will never return there. Mountain Monsters began as a beloved cryptid hunting show featuring a group of rugged Appalachian hunters tracking legendary creatures through the backwoods of West Virginia. The Ames team, led by the legendary Trapper, became fan favorites with their authentic personalities, southern charm, and dedication to uncovering the truth about Bigfoot, the Mothman, and other mysterious beasts. But behind the cameras, tragedy was unfolding that would devastate the cast and shock viewers who thought they were just watching entertaining television. Death, serious injuries, legal troubles, and betrayals tore apart the team that once seemed unbreakable. What happened to these cryptid hunters goes far beyond anything shown on Travel Channel. From devastating health crises to scandalous allegations, the real story of mountain monsters is darker than any creature they ever tracked. Make sure you're subscribed because the truth about what happened to this legendary cast will leave you speechless. John Trapper Tice was the heart and soul of Mountain Monsters. As the team leader of the Ames crew, his gravelly voice, strategic mind, and genuine passion for cryptid investigation made him irreplaceable. Trapper's larger-than-life personality and father-figure presence held the team together through countless dangerous investigations in the Appalachian wilderness. But in early 2019, everything changed when Trapper received a devastating cancer diagnosis that would end his life within months. The cancer was aggressive and had already spread throughout his body by the time doctors discovered it. Trapper, ever the tough Appalachian hunter, initially tried to keep filming despite his deteriorating condition. Those final episodes show a man visibly weakening, struggling to keep pace with investigations that once energized him. His voice, normally commanding and strong, became raspy and strained. Team members noticed, but Trapper refused to quit, insisting he wanted to finish the season and continue doing what he loved. By spring 2019, Trapper could no longer hide how sick he'd become. He passed away quietly, surrounded by family, leaving the Ames team devastated and the show's future uncertain. The news broke hearts across the cryptid hunting community. Fans flooded social media with tributes, sharing favorite Trapper moments and expressing grief over losing someone who felt like family even through a television screen. The remaining cast members, Wild Bill, Willie, Jeff, Huckleberry, and Buck, struggled to process the loss. They'd spent years together in the woods, facing danger and forging bonds that transcended a television show. Losing Trapper meant losing their leader, their strategist, and for many, a mentor and friend who'd guided them through the cryptid hunting world. Travel Channel aired a special tribute episode honoring Trapper's legacy, featuring behind-the-scenes footage and emotional testimonials from the team. Wild Bill broke down on camera describing what Trapper meant to him. Willie shared stories about Trapper's wisdom and kindness off camera. The tribute revealed a man far more complex and caring than the gruff hunter persona he projected during investigations. Trapper's death fundamentally changed Mountain Monsters. The show tried to continue without him, but the chemistry was broken. No one could replace Trapper's leadership or fill the void his absence created. The team investigated cryptids half-heartedly, going through motions that felt empty without their legendary leader calling the shots. William Wild Bill Neff was known for his boisterous personality, infectious laugh, and fearless approach to cryptid hunting. But during filming in late 2018, Wild Bill experienced a terrifying medical emergency that nearly ended his life and forced him to confront his mortality in the West Virginia wilderness. The team was deep in the mountains investigating reports of a mysterious creature when Wild Bill suddenly collapsed, clutching his chest and struggling to breathe. What initially seemed like exhaustion quickly became obvious as something far more serious. Wild Bill was having a heart attack. The remote filming location made immediate medical assistance impossible. The nearest hospital was over an hour away on treacherous mountain roads, and cell phone service was non-existent in that part of Appalachia. The crew and cast members faced a nightmare scenario watching Wild Bill deteriorate while desperately trying to get him help. They loaded him into a truck and raced down the mountain, breaking every speed limit while Wild Bill faded in and out of consciousness in the back seat. Those minutes felt like hours as the team prayed they'd reach the hospital before it was too late. Wild Bill survived, but the incident fundamentally changed him. Doctors explained that years of stress, poor diet, lack of sleep, and the physical demands of all-night cryptid investigations had taken a devastating toll on his cardiovascular system. He was overweight, had dangerously high blood pressure, and his heart was weakened from years of neglect. The prognosis was clear: continue living this way, and the next heart attack would likely be fatal. Wild Bill faced a choice between the show he loved and his life. Recovery required major lifestyle changes, including weight loss, medication, dietary restrictions, and significantly reduced physical activity. The grueling overnight investigations trudging through mountains and swamps were exactly what doctors ordered him to avoid. Wild Bill struggled with this reality, feeling like he was abandoning his team and the cryptid hunting mission that had become his identity. He did return to mountain monsters after months of recovery, but he was different. The boisterous energy was tempered by awareness of his fragility. Viewers noticed Wild Bill participating less in physically demanding aspects of investigations, hanging back while younger team members did the heavy lifting. His close call with death reminded everyone that these weren't just television personalities playing characters. They were real people risking real health consequences for entertainment. Jeff "Buck" Headley's life changed forever during a weekend off from filming when he was involved in a serious ATV accident on his property in West Virginia. Buck, an experienced outdoorsman who'd spent decades navigating Appalachian terrain, was riding familiar trails when he hit an unexpected obstacle and was thrown violently from the vehicle. The ATV rolled over him, causing severe spinal injuries that left him in excruciating pain and facing the possibility of permanent disability. Emergency responders airlifted Buck to a trauma center where doctors delivered devastating news. He had multiple fractured vertebrae, herniated discs, and nerve damage that might never fully heal. Surgery was required immediately to stabilize his spine and prevent paralysis. The operation was successful, but Buck faced months of grueling physical therapy, with no guarantee he'd ever return to normal functioning. The pain was constant and debilitating, requiring heavy prescription painkillers just to get through each day. For someone whose identity centered on being a tough, capable outdoorsman and cryptid hunter, the injury was psychologically devastating as well as physically crippling. Buck's situation created serious questions about his future with mountain monsters. Could he continue participating in dangerous overnight investigations that required hiking rough terrain, building traps, and responding quickly to potential cryptid encounters? The show's insurance and liability concerns were legitimate. If Buck re-injured himself during filming, the production company could face massive lawsuits. But Buck refused to quit. Against medical advice and despite ongoing chronic pain, he insisted on returning to the team. Watching later episodes, you can see Buck struggling. His movements are careful and restricted. He grimaces when climbing over obstacles or bending down. There are moments when pain clearly overwhelms him, and he has to step back while other team members take over. The prescription medications he needed to manage pain also affected his mental sharpness and physical coordination. Buck admitted in interviews that he was taking powerful opioids during filming, a dangerous combination given the show's physical demands and nighttime locations. His determination to continue despite serious injuries spoke to his dedication, but it also raised ethical questions about whether producers should have allowed someone in his condition to keep participating in potentially dangerous situations. In 2020, Travel Channel abruptly canceled Mountain Monsters after 8 seasons, devastating fans and leaving the cast blindsided by a decision that seemed to come out of nowhere. The show had been a consistent ratings performer for the network, drawing loyal audiences who tuned in religiously to follow the Ames team's cryptid investigations. So why would Travel Channel suddenly pull the plug on one of their most recognizable paranormal programs? The official explanation cited programming changes and network restructuring, the generic corporate language that reveals nothing. But insiders tell a very different story about behind-the-scenes chaos that made the show unsustainable. After Trapper's death, production costs increased dramatically as the network tried various approaches to maintain the show's appeal. They brought in consultants, hired additional crew members, and extended filming schedules attempting to recapture the magic that died with Trapper. None of it worked, and budgets ballooned while ratings slowly declined. The remaining cast members were also demanding higher salaries, arguing that as original team members carrying the show without their leader, they deserved significant raises. Negotiations became contentious, with some cast members threatening to quit if their demands weren't met. Travel Channel executives faced an impossible situation: pay more for a show that was performing worse, or cut their losses and move on. There were also rumors of serious conflicts between cast members and producers about creative direction. Some team members wanted to honor Trapper's legacy by maintaining the show's original investigative approach. Others pushed for dramatic changes, including new team members, different locations, and more scripted encounters to boost excitement. These creative disagreements created tension on set that made filming difficult and unpleasant for everyone involved. Production sources described arguments between cast and crew, missed filming days due to disputes, and an overall toxic atmosphere that replaced the camaraderie that once defined Mountain Monsters. The final factor was the broader industry shift towards streaming content and away from traditional cable programming. Travel Channel's parent company was consolidating shows, canceling underperforming series, and investing resources into digital platforms rather than cable television. Mountain Monsters became a casualty of changing media consumption habits and corporate restructuring that had nothing to do with the show's quality or the cast's dedication. When cancellation was announced, fans launched massive social media campaigns demanding the show's return, creating petitions that gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures and flooding Travel Channel with angry messages. Jacob Huckleberry Lowe projected a fun-loving, good-natured persona on Mountain Monsters, often providing comic relief during tense investigations with his jokes and enthusiasm. But away from cameras, Huckleberry faced serious legal troubles that threatened his role on the show and revealed a much darker reality behind his television personality. Court records show Huckleberry was arrested multiple times over the years on charges ranging from DUI to domestic incidents, creating serious problems for Travel Channel producers who had to decide whether to continue employing someone with an increasingly troubling legal history. The DUI arrest was particularly problematic because it happened during the show's peak popularity, generating local news coverage that connected Huckleberry directly to Mountain Monsters. He was pulled over late at night driving erratically, failed field sobriety tests, and was taken into custody with a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit. This wasn't a minor mistake. It was dangerous, irresponsible behavior that could have killed someone. Huckleberry's mugshot circulated online, and fans were shocked to see their favorite jovial cryptid hunter looking disheveled and intoxicated in a county jail. The arrest raised questions about whether substance abuse issues were affecting Huckleberry during filming. Crew members later admitted there were times when Huckleberry seemed impaired on set, showing up to investigations with alcohol on his breath or behaving erratically in ways that went beyond his usual comedic personality. Producers allegedly ignored these warning signs because replacing a main cast member would disrupt the show, choosing ratings over addressing legitimate concerns about Huckleberry's well-being and the safety risks his behavior created. Additional legal troubles involved domestic disputes that resulted in police being called to Huckleberry's residence on multiple occasions. While specific details remain sealed in court records, the pattern suggested ongoing personal problems that were escalating rather than improving. Some cast members distanced themselves from Huckleberry during this period, frustrated by his refusal to address his issues and embarrassed by the negative attention his behavior brought to the show. Travel Channel considered removing Huckleberry from Mountain Monsters entirely, holding emergency meetings with producers and lawyers about contractual options and potential liability if he caused serious problems during filming. Ultimately, they decided to keep him, believing fans would revolt if another original team member disappeared after Trapper's death. But Huckleberry was reportedly placed on strict behavioral conditions, including mandatory sobriety during filming and immediate termination if any additional arrests occurred. From its first episode, Mountain Monsters faced accusations of faking evidence and staging cryptid encounters for dramatic effect. Skeptics analyzed footage frame by frame, identifying what they claimed were obvious fabrications, hired actors in creature costumes, and manipulated thermal imaging meant to convince viewers the Ames team was encountering real paranormal phenomena. The allegations gained serious traction when former crew members began speaking out anonymously on paranormal forums and Reddit threads, sharing behind-the-scenes details about how certain scenes were constructed and evidence was manufactured. One of the most controversial incidents involved thermal imaging footage allegedly showing a large bipedal creature moving through the forest during a Bigfoot investigation. Skeptics quickly pointed out inconsistencies in the thermal signature, arguing the heat distribution was inconsistent with a living creature and more consistent with a person wearing a costume with strategically placed heating elements. Video analysis experts noted that the creature moved in ways suspiciously similar to a human gait, despite producers claiming it was too large and moved too unusually to be a person. The Ames team defended the footage as authentic, but the technical breakdowns were damaging and convinced many viewers the show was deliberately deceiving its audience. The elaborate traps the team built to capture cryptids became another source of fraud allegations. Critics noted that despite spending entire episodes constructing complex snares, cages, and trigger mechanisms, the traps never actually caught anything significant. The pattern was predictable. The team would find evidence suggesting a creature was nearby, build an impressive trap, set up cameras, and return the next morning to find the trap mysteriously destroyed or bypassed by whatever they were hunting. Skeptics argued this was scripted failure designed to maintain ongoing narrative tension while never having to produce actual cryptid specimens that would expose the show as fiction. Some of the most damning allegations came from local residents in areas where Mountain Monsters filmed who claimed they witnessed production assistants placing fake evidence like footprints, claw marks, and disturbed vegetation before the main cast discovered these clues on camera. One West Virginia resident described watching crew members preparing a filming location hours before the Ames team arrived, strategically placing items and creating disturbances that would later be presented as organic cryptid evidence. These eyewitness accounts, combined with technical analysis of questionable footage, created a compelling case that Mountain Monsters was entertainment fiction rather than legitimate investigation. Willie McQuillian appeared to be one of the most stable and grounded members of the Ames team, but behind his calm demeanor, he was enduring heartbreaking personal tragedies that would have destroyed most people. During Mountain Monsters' run, Willie lost multiple close family members in rapid succession, including his beloved mother and a sibling, creating a grief spiral that profoundly affected his mental health and his ability to continue filming. Those who knew Willie personally described him as devastated, struggling to process losses that came too quickly to properly mourn before the next tragedy struck. The timing was particularly cruel because Willie's grief coincided with the most demanding production schedule Mountain Monsters had ever faced. He was expected to film grueling overnight investigations in remote locations while emotionally shattered by family deaths, putting on a brave face for cameras while internally falling apart. Cast members noticed Willie becoming withdrawn and distant during this period. The jovial personality that usually emerged during investigations was replaced by someone going through motions mechanically, participating but not truly present. In some episodes from this era, you can see the pain in Willie's eyes even as he tries to focus on cryptid hunting. There are moments when he stands apart from the group, lost in thought, clearly somewhere else mentally, while his teammates discuss investigation strategies. Production sources say Willie requested time off to deal with family matters, but the filming schedule made extended breaks nearly impossible. Missing episodes would disrupt the entire season's arc and create budget problems that producers weren't willing to accommodate. So Willie continued working while grieving, a situation that was unfair and potentially damaging to his well-being. The support system within the Ames team became crucial during Willie's darkest period. Wild Bill, Buck, and other team members rallied around him, offering emotional support and covering for him when grief made it impossible to function normally. They'd grown close over years of shared experiences, and that bond meant something when Willie needed it most. Off camera, the team checked on him constantly, made sure he wasn't alone, and provided the kind of friendship that transcends professional relationships. Trapper, before his own death, was particularly supportive of Willie, offering fatherly advice and perspective gained from his own experiences with loss. Willie later said that Trapper's guidance helped him survive that terrible period, making Trapper's subsequent death even more devastating as Willie lost not just his team leader but a mentor and friend who'd helped him through previous tragedies. After the initial cancellation, Mountain Monsters shocked fans by returning to Travel Channel in 2022. But the comeback was anything but triumphant. What should have been a joyous reunion of beloved cryptid hunters instead became a source of bitter controversy, exposed tensions, and accusations of betrayal that destroyed relationships within the Ames team. The central conflict revolved around how to continue the show without Trapper, and whether new cast members should be added to fill the void his death created. Travel Channel executives pushed hard for fresh faces, believing the show needed new energy and younger demographics to survive in a changing television landscape. Some original team members agreed, viewing new additions as necessary evolution. Others saw it as disrespectful to Trapper's memory and a betrayal of what Mountain Monsters represented. A tight-knit group of Appalachian hunters with genuine history together. The decision to bring in newcomers split the team into factions. Wild Bill and Jeff supported the additions, arguing the show had to adapt or die permanently. Willie and Huckleberry opposed changes, wanting to honor the original team's legacy by keeping the group exclusive to those who'd worked alongside Trapper. These weren't minor disagreements. They became heated arguments about loyalty, legacy, and what the show meant beyond just paychecks and television fame. The tension was palpable on screen, with obvious coldness between cast members who once seemed like family. Money became another major source of conflict. The return deal included renegotiated contracts with wildly different compensation levels based on seniority and perceived value to the show. Some original members received substantial raises, while others were offered the same rates they'd earned years earlier. The disparity created resentment and accusations that certain cast members were prioritizing personal profit over team unity. There were ugly confrontations about who deserved what based on their contributions to Mountain Monsters' success, with some team members feeling undervalued and disrespected by the compensation structure. The worst betrayal involved leaked private conversations where cast members criticized each other to producers, suggesting who should be reduced to smaller roles or removed entirely. When these backstabbing comments became known within the group, friendships that had survived years of cryptid hunting in dangerous conditions shattered overnight. Trust evaporated as team members realized people they considered brothers were actively working to diminish their roles or push them off the show completely for competitive and financial advantage. Wild Bill continues cryptid hunting with limited physical activity due to heart issues. Buck struggles with chronic pain from spinal injuries and has withdrawn from public life. Willie left cryptid hunting entirely, focusing on family and healing. Huckleberry remains involved in small-scale investigations, but networks avoid him due to legal troubles. Legal battles continue over show ownership and unpaid residuals. The tight-knit Ames team is fractured beyond repair, with former friends now avoiding each other, and the Mountain Monsters' legacy tarnished by tragedy and betrayal. Mountain Monsters has been off the air for years, but the real reason production stopped has finally been revealed. This wasn't a simple cancellation. It was a forced shutdown triggered by massive lawsuits, insurance investigations, and fraud allegations that Travel Channel desperately tried to hide. Former crew members are now exposing systematic evidence fabrication, cast members suing each other over stolen money, Trapper's family demanding justice. The truth buried for years is finally coming to light. Subscribe now because what's being revealed about why Mountain Monsters really ended is darker than anyone imagined. Mountain Monsters production came to an abrupt halt in late 2022, but the circumstances surrounding that shutdown were deliberately obscured by Travel Channel and the production companies involved. What viewers were told was a mutual decision to end the series after a successful run was actually an emergency stoppage triggered by legal and financial crises that made continuing production impossible. Cast members arrived for what they believed would be a routine filming week in West Virginia, only to be informed via group text message that production was suspended indefinitely. No explanation was provided beyond vague references to business complications requiring immediate attention. Equipment trucks that had already arrived at filming locations were turned around and sent back to storage facilities. Local guides and property owners who'd been contracted for the week's investigations were told their services were no longer needed, with some never receiving the cancellation fees they'd been promised in their agreements. The chaos and lack of communication revealed a production in complete disarray, scrambling to shut down operations before information about brewing legal problems became public knowledge. Crew members who'd worked on Mountain Monsters for years were blindsided by the sudden shutdown. Camera operators, sound technicians, and production assistants who depended on the show for steady income found themselves unemployed without warning or severance packages. Several crew members later reported that their final paychecks bounced, requiring them to pursue legal action just to recover wages they'd already earned for work completed before the shutdown. The production company, Ping Pong Productions, stopped responding to phone calls and emails from cast and crew seeking information about when or if filming would resume. The silence suggested something far more serious than typical production delays or budget negotiations. Industry insiders began hearing rumors about lawsuits, insurance problems, and financial irregularities that had finally caught up with a show that had been operating under questionable practices for years. Travel Channel maintained public silence about the shutdown for months, refusing to confirm or deny whether Mountain Monsters would return. That silence was strategic. The network was consulting with legal teams about how to distance itself from the mounting scandals while minimizing its own liability exposure. Internal documents later revealed that Travel Channel executives had been aware of problematic practices on Mountain Monsters for years, but chose to ignore them as long as the show delivered acceptable ratings and revenue. The lawsuit that ultimately forced Mountain Monsters production to stop permanently was filed in October 2022 by a coalition of former crew members alleging a pattern of labor violations, unsafe working conditions, and systematic fraud that the production company had perpetrated over multiple seasons. The complaint, filed in West Virginia State Court, named Ping Pong Productions, Travel Channel's parent company Warner Bros. Discovery, and several individual producers as defendants. The allegations were damning and specific, backed by documentation including contracts, emails, text messages, and testimony from dozens of witnesses. The lawsuit's central claims focused on wage theft. Crew members alleged they were consistently paid less than their contracts specified, forced to work excessive hours without overtime compensation, and denied meal penalties and other legally mandated benefits. Production assistants reported working 16-hour days during investigation filming, but being paid for only 8 hours, with producers threatening termination if they complained about the discrepancies. The complaint included detailed records showing systematic underpayment totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars across multiple crew members over several seasons. Even more explosive were allegations about evidence fabrication. Former production assistants provided sworn declarations describing how they were instructed to plant fake footprints, create artificial claw marks on trees, and place hair samples and scat that would later be discovered by the Ames team during investigations. One former employee detailed purchasing a gorilla costume from a Hollywood effects company and wearing it during night filming while cast members pretended to hunt for cryptids. The lawsuit included receipts for these purchases, emails discussing logistics of creating fake evidence, and text messages where producers explicitly acknowledged they were staging encounters because authentic cryptid activity couldn't be relied upon to provide enough dramatic content for each episode. The unsafe working conditions allegations focused on nighttime filming in dangerous terrain without proper safety equipment, inadequate medical support during remote investigations, and pressure on cast members to continue working despite injuries and health problems. The complaint specifically cited Buck's ATV accident and subsequent filming while he was clearly impaired by pain medications as examples of production prioritizing content over crew safety. Insurance fraud allegations claimed the production company had misrepresented the nature of filming activities to obtain coverage, then filed false claims when injuries occurred. The legal warfare among Mountain Monsters cast members revealed that the Ames team's apparent brotherhood was a facade hiding bitter disputes over money, credit, and control of the show's valuable intellectual property. The conflicts began even before Trapper's death, but escalated dramatically afterward as surviving cast members fought over who deserved what share of residual payments, merchandising revenue, and potential future earnings from the Mountain Monsters brand. Wild Bill filed a lawsuit in 2021 against the production company, claiming he was owed over $300,000 in unpaid residuals from streaming and international distribution that his contract entitled him to receive. His complaint alleged that Ping Pong Productions had deliberately hidden revenue streams and provided false accounting statements to avoid paying cast members their contractual shares. Wild Bill's attorneys subpoenaed financial records that revealed Mountain Monsters had generated millions in revenue from Netflix licensing, Amazon Prime streaming, and international sales that cast members had never been informed about or compensated for, despite contractual provisions entitling them to percentage participation. Buck and Jeff filed a joint lawsuit making similar claims. arguing they'd been systematically cheated out of earnings they'd legitimately earned through years of dangerous work on the show. Their case included allegations that producers had created shell companies to funnel revenue away from the main production entity, specifically to avoid contractual obligations to pay cast members. The legal filings exposed how production companies exploit reality television performers through complex corporate structures designed to minimize payments while maximizing producer profits. Most bitter was the conflict between cast members themselves over merchandising rights. When Mountain Monsters merchandise, including t-shirts, hats, and collectibles, began generating significant revenue, disputes erupted about who owned the rights to the Ames Team brand, individual cast member images, and catchphrases used on the show. Huckleberry claimed he'd never signed away his image rights and demanded compensation for any merchandise featuring his likeness. Wild Bill and Jeff argued they had agreements with the production company that entitled them to merchandising percentages, while Buck contended that all cast members should share equally in merchandise revenue regardless of individual contracts. The legal battles became so contentious that cast members stopped speaking to each other entirely, destroying any possibility of the team reuniting for future productions, even if the show's other problems were resolved. The insurance investigation that ultimately made Mountain Monsters production legally impossible began after Buck's ATV accident, when the production company's liability insurer received a claim for medical expenses and disability payments related to his injuries. Insurance adjusters conducting routine investigation of the claim discovered discrepancies between what the production company had disclosed about filming activities versus what actually occurred during Mountain Monsters investigations. The insurer had been told filming involved outdoor recreation and nature documentation, with appropriate safety protocols, when in reality cast members were conducting dangerous nighttime investigations in rough terrain without adequate medical support, safety equipment, or supervision. Buck's accident triggered a comprehensive audit of all previous claims filed by Mountain Monsters production over multiple seasons. Investigators discovered a disturbing pattern. Numerous cast and crew members had filed injury claims related to filming, far exceeding the rate expected for the type of production activities the insurance company believed they were covering. Wild Bill's heart attack, various sprains and fractures among crew members, and multiple emergency room visits for injuries sustained during investigations revealed that Mountain Monsters was significantly more dangerous than the production company had disclosed when obtaining coverage. The insurance company determined that Ping Pong Productions had committed material misrepresentation by failing to disclose the true nature and risks of filming activities. They described Mountain Monsters as comparable to wildlife documentary production, when it actually involved cast members hiking dangerous terrain at night, building elaborate physical structures without engineering oversight, and engaging in activities that would require specialized stunt coordination and safety protocols if accurately disclosed. This misrepresentation potentially voided coverage for all previous claims and certainly terminated the policy going forward. Without insurance coverage, Mountain Monsters couldn't legally film. No location would grant permits, no network would authorize production, and cast and crew wouldn't work without liability protection. The production company attempted to obtain new coverage from other insurers, but once the previous carrier's investigation findings became known in the industry, no reputable insurance company would cover Mountain Monsters at any price. The few quotes the production company received for high-risk coverage required premiums so expensive they exceeded the show's entire production budget, making filming financially impossible even if they could find an insurer willing to take the risk. The legal action initiated by Trapper's family in 2023 opened a painful and complicated chapter in Mountain Monsters' troubled legacy, pitting Trapper's widow and children against the production company and network over how their deceased family member's image and legacy had been exploited since his death in 2019. The family's attorneys filed suit claiming that Ping Pong Productions had made verbal promises to compensate Trapper's estate for continued use of his image in episodes, promotional materials, and merchandise following his death, but had never formalized those promises in writing or made any payments. After Trapper died, Mountain Monsters continued airing episodes featuring him, released tribute merchandise with his image, and used his likeness extensively in marketing materials to promote new seasons, all generating revenue that his family never received a share of despite alleged promises from producers. The lawsuit argued this constituted both breach of contract based on oral agreements and violation of Trapper's publicity rights that passed to his estate upon death. West Virginia law provides that publicity rights, the right to control commercial use of one's name, image, and likeness, survive death, and can be enforced by heirs for a specified period. Trapper's family claimed the production company had no legal right to continue profiting from his image without compensation to his estate, yet they'd done exactly that for over 3 years, while stonewalling the family's requests for accounting and payment. The emotional dimension of the lawsuit was heartbreaking. Trapper's widow described watching Mountain Monsters merchandise featuring her late husband being sold online and in stores while her family struggled financially with medical debt from his final illness and funeral expenses that the production company had promised to help with but never did. She testified in depositions about producers calling after Trapper's death expressing condolences and assuring her the family would be taken care of, then subsequently ignoring her calls and emails when she attempted to discuss the promised financial support. The family's legal demands were substantial. They sought an accounting of all revenue generated from Trapper's image since his death, compensation for past use of his likeness, and an injunction preventing any future commercial use of Trapper's image until a licensing agreement with appropriate compensation was negotiated. The injunction threat was existential for Mountain Monsters because Trapper was the show's most beloved figure, and removing him from future content would eliminate much of the show's nostalgic appeal and marketability. The systematic evidence fabrication on Mountain Monsters was exposed in devastating detail when multiple former production assistants came forward with documentation proving that virtually every major cryptid encounter and evidence discovery on the show had been staged, scripted, or manipulated to create false drama. The whistleblowers provided attorneys with emails, text messages, invoices, and video footage that painted a picture of a production built entirely on deception from its earliest seasons through its final episodes. One former production assistant provided a detailed written statement describing his responsibilities during filming, which included arriving at investigation locations hours before cast members to plant evidence that would later be discovered during filming. He described creating fake Bigfoot footprints using carved wooden stamps, hanging tufts of synthetic hair purchased from costume suppliers on tree branches where they'd be noticed by cameras, and placing animal scat purchased from exotic animal facilities to suggest cryptid presence. The statement included photographs he'd secretly taken of these evidence-planting activities as insurance against potential legal liability. Images that clearly showed production crew members staging the very evidence that would be presented as authentic discoveries. Email correspondence between producers and special effects companies revealed extensive discussions about creating creature costumes for night filming. One email chain detailed specifications for a realistic Bigfoot suit with appropriate movement characteristics for distance filming that cost over $12,000 to manufacture. The emails explicitly discussed how the costume would be used during Mountain Monsters investigations, with cast members pretending to encounter an actual cryptid. Invoices for the costume purchase and rental agreements for subsequent uses provided irrefutable documentation of premeditated fraud. Text messages between producers showed casual acknowledgement of the fabrication with jokes about manufacturing evidence, and discussions of which cast members were better at selling fake discoveries convincingly on camera. Perhaps most damning were behind-the-scenes video clips that production assistants had recorded on personal phones showing the reality of filming versus what appeared in broadcast episodes. One clip showed a dramatic Bigfoot encounter being filmed multiple times from different angles with a clearly visible person in a costume, followed by producers coaching cast members on how to react more convincingly for the final take that would air. The authenticity that made Mountain Monsters appealing was completely manufactured. Multiple property owners across West Virginia filed lawsuits against Mountain Monsters production, claiming trespassing, property damage, and filming without proper authorization or compensation. The legal actions revealed that producers had often filmed on private land without securing proper permits or landowner consent, relying on verbal agreements that were never formalized or compensated appropriately. One lawsuit filed by a family in Pocahontas County detailed extensive property damage caused by construction of elaborate traps and staging areas for investigations. The production had built wooden structures, dug pits, and cleared vegetation without permission, leaving behind debris and environmental damage when filming concluded. The property owners estimated repair costs exceeding $50,000 and sought compensation plus punitive damages for the unauthorized use of their land for commercial purposes. Another case involved a landowner who claimed producers had promised payment of $5,000 for location access, but never delivered the money despite filming multiple episodes on the property over 2 seasons. When the landowner attempted to collect, producers stopped responding to communications entirely. The lawsuit included text messages and emails documenting the original agreement and subsequent attempts to obtain payment. Most problematic were allegations that production had filmed in state parks and protected wilderness areas without proper permits from authorities. West Virginia Department of Natural Resources investigators discovered that mountain monsters had conducted filming in restricted areas, built structures in protected habitats, and violated environmental regulations regarding waste disposal and vegetation disturbance. The state issued fines totaling over $100,000 and referred the matter for potential criminal prosecution. These land disputes created additional legal and financial burdens that made continuing production untenable, while also damaging relationships with West Virginia communities that had initially welcomed the show as promoting local cryptid folklore and tourism. Travel Channel's decision to permanently end Mountain Monsters came after executives conducted a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis revealing the show had become a massive liability that outweighed any remaining revenue potential. The network faced mounting legal exposure from multiple lawsuits naming Travel Channel alongside production companies as co-defendants. Even if the network prevailed in litigation, defending against claims would cost millions in legal fees while generating negative publicity that damaged Travel Channel's brand reputation with viewers and advertisers. Ratings for Mountain Monsters had declined significantly in later seasons as viewer skepticism about evidence authenticity increased, and the show failed to evolve beyond repetitive investigation formats. The loss of Trapper had hurt viewership substantially, and attempts to continue without him proved unsuccessful at retaining audience loyalty. Meanwhile, production costs had increased due to insurance complications, legal compliance requirements, and cast member salary demands, shrinking already marginal profit margins to unsustainable levels. Network executives recognized that Mountain Monsters had become associated with fraud allegations and exploitation controversies that conflicted with Travel Channel's efforts to position itself as a credible source of adventure and exploration content. The show's reputation for faking evidence undermined the network's other paranormal programming and created skepticism among viewers about whether any Travel Channel content could be trusted. The decision was made to cancel Mountain Monsters permanently, cease all future development, and gradually phase out the show from streaming platforms and syndication to distance the network from ongoing controversies. Travel Channel announced plans to develop new cryptid and paranormal investigation programming with stricter authenticity standards, enhanced safety protocols, and transparent disclosure about investigation methods to rebuild viewer trust damaged by Mountain Monsters' troubled legacy. Wild Bill attempts independent YouTube content with minimal success. Buck withdrew from public life, managing chronic pain and working occasional construction jobs. Jeff explores other paranormal projects, but Mountain Monsters' fraud reputation makes him unhireable. Huckleberry does small-scale cryptid hunting and convention appearances for modest income. The Ames team is fractured beyond repair, members no longer speaking due to legal disputes and personal betrayals. Mountain Monsters became a cautionary tale about reality TV exploitation rather than Appalachian folklore celebration. Buck Jacob Lowe from Mountain Monsters has been keeping a devastating secret for years. The ATV accident that nearly killed him and left him with permanent injuries wasn't just a routine mishap on familiar trails. It was caused by a terrifying Bigfoot encounter that producers forced him to cover up. For years, Buck has lived with chronic pain, addiction struggles, and the burden of knowing he encountered something real while the show around him faked evidence for ratings. Now, Buck is finally breaking his silence about what really happened that day, why the network buried the truth, and the evidence he's kept hidden that proves his story. The revelation will expose one of the biggest cover-ups in paranormal television history and validate what cryptid hunters have believed all along. Make sure you're subscribed because Buck is about to prove that the most genuine encounter in Mountain Monsters history was the one Travel Channel worked hardest to hide from viewers. Buck Jacob Lowe's social media post dropped like a bomb on the Mountain Monsters fan community in late January 2025. After years of relative silence following his departure from the show, Buck posted a lengthy statement on Facebook that began with words that immediately grabbed attention. "It's time I told you the truth about what really happened to me, and why I can never go back to that mountain again." The post was raw, emotional, and clearly written by someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. Buck explained that legal restrictions and non-disclosure agreements had prevented him from speaking openly about his accident, but those restrictions had finally expired, freeing him to share the full story. Within minutes, The post had hundreds of comments from shocked fans demanding details. What truth had Buck been forced to hide? Why were there legal restrictions around what seemed like a simple ATV accident? The cryptic nature of Buck's announcement sparked immediate speculation across paranormal forums, Reddit threads, and YouTube channels. Some fans theorized Buck was finally going to expose mountain monsters as completely fake, confessing that everything was scripted and staged. Others wondered if Buck was revealing serious behind-the-scenes conflicts with cast members or production companies. A few perceptive fans noticed Buck's specific phrasing, what really happened on that mountain, and began speculating that maybe the accident wasn't as straightforward as viewers had been told. Buck followed up his initial post with a promise to reveal everything in a forthcoming video interview, stating he had evidence that will prove what I'm about to tell you and why the network never wanted this story to come out. The mention of evidence intrigued the community even more. What could Buck possibly have that Travel Channel feared? His final comment in that initial post sent chills through longtime Mountain Monsters viewers. The most real thing that ever happened during all our years hunting cryptids is the thing they made me lie about. The creature that nearly killed me was real, and I'm done protecting people who cared more about their liability than the truth. The cryptid hunting community exploded with theories. Buck was claiming an actual creature encounter, not just another staged investigation, but one that had been covered up rather than celebrated. This contradicted everything fans thought they knew about his accident. Buck's detailed account of what happened that September afternoon in 2018 reads like something from a horror film, but he insists every word is true and he has evidence to prove it. Buck was riding his ATV on private property adjacent to where mountain monsters frequently filmed, an area he'd traversed hundreds of times over decades of living in Appalachia. He knew every trail, every turn, and every potential hazard on that land. What he didn't expect was to encounter a massive bipedal creature standing in a clearing approximately 75 yards ahead of him. Buck initially thought it was a person, maybe a hunter or hiker who'd wandered onto private land, but as he slowed his ATV and got a clearer view, he realized this was something else entirely. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall with dark brown hair covering its entire body except for its face, which Buck describes as a horrifying mix of human and ape features. The smell hit him next. A putrid, musky odor that made his eyes water even from that distance. Buck sat frozen on his idling ATV for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds, trying to process what he was seeing. The creature noticed him. It turned its massive head, made direct eye contact with Buck, and released a vocalization that Buck describes as the most terrifying sound he'd ever heard. A combination of roar and scream that seemed impossibly loud and resonated in his chest. Then it charged. The creature moved with shocking speed for something so large, covering the distance between them faster than seemed physically possible. Buck reacted on pure instinct, twisting the throttle and attempting to turn the ATV around to flee back down the trail. In his panic and the desperate need for speed on rough terrain, Buck lost control. The ATV hit a large rock, partially hidden in tall grass, sending Buck airborne before slamming him into the ground and rolling the vehicle over his lower back and legs. He remembers the immediate explosion of pain, the inability to move his legs, and the terrifying realization that the creature was still somewhere nearby. Buck could hear it crashing through the brush, circling his position, apparently curious about what had happened but maintaining distance from the wrecked ATV. Buck lay in agony for nearly 20 minutes before help arrived, unable to move and terrified the creature would return. A family member who'd heard the ATV crash found him and called emergency services. Buck tried explaining what had chased him, but in his injured, traumatized state, his rescuers assumed he was confused or hallucinating from pain. By the time paramedics arrived and transported Buck to the hospital, word had already reached Mountain Monsters producers that one of their cast members had been seriously injured. The medical diagnosis was devastating: multiple fractured vertebrae, severe herniated discs, and nerve damage that would require immediate surgery and months of rehabilitation with no guarantee of full recovery. While Buck was still in the hospital recovering from emergency spinal surgery, he received visits from Travel Channel executives and production company lawyers that he describes as more interrogation than wellness check. They asked detailed questions about exactly what had happened, whether anyone else witnessed the encounter, and crucially, whether Buck had captured any video or photographic evidence of the creature. When Buck explained that he'd encountered a Bigfoot that charged him causing the accident, the lawyer's demeanor immediately shifted. They explained very clearly that Buck could not, under any circumstances, publicly claim his accident was caused by a cryptid encounter. The reasons were legal and financial. Without video evidence proving a creature was present, Buck's claim was legally just an allegation that could expose the production company and network to massive liability. If Buck was injured by an actual dangerous animal on a location where mountain monsters had been filming, it raised questions about whether proper safety protocols had been followed and whether the production had knowingly put cast members in danger. Insurance companies would investigate, lawsuits could follow, and the show itself might be canceled if it was determined that cryptid hunting posed genuine safety risks that weren't being properly managed. Buck was presented with revised non-disclosure agreements that specifically prohibited him from discussing the circumstances of his accident beyond describing it as a routine ATV mishap. If he violated these terms, he would be immediately removed from the show, forfeit any future compensation, and potentially face legal action for breach of contract. Buck, vulnerable and medicated in a hospital bed, signed the agreements under duress. Buck's recovery from spinal surgery required powerful prescription opioids to manage the excruciating pain that became his constant companion. Doctors prescribed OxyContin, Percocet, and eventually fentanyl patches for pain that simply wouldn't subside even months after the accident. What began as legitimate medical treatment for serious injuries gradually transformed into dependency that Buck didn't recognize until it had completely taken over his life. The pain from his injuries was real and debilitating, but Buck found himself taking pills not just for physical relief, but to numb the psychological trauma of the Bigfoot encounter and the guilt of lying about what had really happened. Every time someone asked about his accident and Buck repeated the rehearsed story about hitting a rock on a familiar trail, he felt like a fraud. The pills helped silence that voice of shame temporarily. Buck admits he began taking more than prescribed, convincing himself that the extra doses were medically necessary, when in reality, he was chasing the euphoric escape the medications provided from both physical and emotional agony. When doctors tried to reduce his prescriptions as healing progressed, Buck doctor shopped to maintain his supply, visiting multiple physicians and pharmacies to obtain overlapping prescriptions. He became skilled at manipulating medical professionals, exaggerating symptoms, and playing up his injuries to justify continued high-dose opioid therapy long after it was medically appropriate. The addiction affected his behavior during Mountain Monsters filming in ways that crew members noticed but production largely ignored. Buck would show up to investigations visibly impaired, slurring words, moving with the slow deliberateness of someone heavily medicated. There were moments captured on camera where Buck seemed confused or disconnected, staring blankly while other cast members discussed investigation strategies. Editors worked around his worst moments, cutting scenes where Buck's impairment was too obvious to hide. Other cast members confronted Buck privately about showing up to dangerous nighttime investigations in the woods while clearly under the influence of something. The concerns were both personal. They cared about Buck's well-being, and practical. An impaired team member put everyone at risk during investigations in rough terrain and potentially dangerous situations. Buck became defensive and denied having any problem, insisting he was only taking prescribed medications for legitimate injuries. The intervention finally came when Buck's family discovered the extent of his addiction after finding multiple pill bottles from different doctors and pharmacies hidden throughout his home. The decision to cover up Buck's Bigfoot encounter was calculated and deliberate, driven by legal liability concerns that overwhelmed any consideration of honoring what may have been a genuine cryptid experience. Travel Channel's insurance policies for Mountain Monsters covered injuries sustained during normal production activities, slips, falls, equipment accidents, and other predictable hazards of filming in wilderness locations. But injuries caused by actual dangerous wildlife or cryptid creatures opened an entirely different legal nightmare that insurers explicitly excluded from coverage. If Buck's encounter was real and the network acknowledged it, they'd be admitting that Mountain Monsters cast members faced genuine danger from creatures the show was supposedly investigating. This would trigger immediate insurance investigations, potential policy cancellations, and liability exposure worth millions if Buck or other cast members filed injury lawsuits claiming inadequate safety protocols. Production companies and networks maintain detailed safety procedures for reality television, including wildlife protocols, location assessments, and emergency response plans. Acknowledging that a cast member was attacked by an unknown creature would reveal that all those safety procedures were inadequate for the actual risks involved. Regulatory agencies, including OSHA, could investigate whether proper workplace safety standards were being followed. State film commissions might revoke permits for future productions. The legal department's worst-case scenario involved Buck's encounter becoming public and inspiring other cast or crew members to come forward with their own cryptid experiences that had been downplayed or ignored. If a pattern emerged of genuine dangerous encounters, encounters being covered up while the show simultaneously marketed itself as documenting real cryptid investigations. The network faced potential fraud claims from viewers and advertisers. Lawsuits alleging deceptive business practices could expose the show's scripted elements and staged evidence to legal scrutiny. Beyond liability, there was a cynical calculation about credibility. Mountain monsters had been accused for years of faking evidence and staging encounters. If Buck came forward claiming a real Bigfoot attack caused his accident, skeptics would assume it was just another publicity stunt to boost ratings. The story seemed too convenient. A cast member of a cryptid hunting show just happens to have a genuine encounter off camera with no footage to prove it. Critics would mock the claim mercilessly, potentially doing more damage to the show's reputation than simply saying nothing. The network decided that silence was the safest option legally, financially, and reputationally. John Trapper Tice was one of the few people Buck confided in about what really happened, and Trapper's reaction revealed a man deeply conflicted about what mountain monsters had become versus what he'd originally envisioned. Buck reached out to Trapper while still recovering in the hospital, needing to talk with someone who would understand both the magnitude of encountering a real cryptid and the complicated position the network had put him in. Trapper listened to Buck's account without interruption, then said something Buck will never forget. "I believe you completely, and I'm sorry this happened to you in more ways than one." Trapper explained that he'd had his own unexplained encounters over years of genuinely hunting cryptids in Appalachia, long before television got involved. He'd seen things he couldn't explain, heard vocalizations that didn't match any known animal, and found evidence that convinced him something unknown lived in those mountains. But he'd also watched mountain monsters transform from a show about legitimate investigation into something increasingly staged and scripted to meet network demands for dramatic content. Trapper was furious that producers were forcing Buck to hide a genuine encounter while simultaneously faking evidence for episodes. The hypocrisy disgusted him. The one real cryptid experience that could validate everything they'd been claiming was being buried for legal and financial reasons, while manufactured drama was presented as authentic investigation. Trapper confronted producers about the Buck situation, arguing they should find a way to tell his story that respected both the truth and legitimate legal concerns. The network refused, and Trapper's relationship with production became increasingly strained. In private conversations during Buck's recovery period, Trapper shared his own regrets about how the show had evolved. He felt complicit in deceiving fans who genuinely believed in their work, and the Buck situation crystallized his concerns about the ethical problems inherent in paranormal entertainment television. Trapper encouraged Buck to prioritize his health and well-being over the show, even if that meant walking away entirely. He offered to support Buck publicly if he ever decided to tell the truth, regardless of consequences from the network. Those conversations meant everything to Buck during his darkest period. Trapper's death, less than a year later, hit Buck especially hard because he'd lost not just a team leader, but the one person who fully understood and validated his experience. Buck's secret about the Bigfoot encounter created a fracture within the Ames team that never fully healed, dividing cast members between those who believed his story and supported him versus those who thought he was lying or exaggerating for attention and sympathy. The division started almost immediately after Buck returned to filming following his recovery. He confided in select team members about what had really happened, hoping for understanding and support from people he'd worked alongside for years. Wild Bill was among the first Buck told, and his reaction was unexpectedly harsh. Wild Bill expressed skepticism about the encounter, suggesting that Buck's pain medications and trauma had caused him to misinterpret what he'd seen. He pointed out that convenient off-camera encounters without evidence were exactly the kind of thing skeptics accused the show of fabricating. Wild Bill's dismissal felt like betrayal to Buck, who'd expected his longtime friend to believe him unconditionally. Their relationship deteriorated from that point, with Buck feeling unsupported during the most difficult period of his life, while Wild Bill felt Buck was being irresponsible by spreading unprovable claims that could damage the show's credibility. The argument escalated into accusations about who was really loyal to the team and whether Buck's addiction issues were affecting his judgment about what had actually happened. Other cast members took sides. Willie believed Buck's story completely, having had his own unexplained experiences in Appalachian wilderness that he'd never shared publicly. Willie became one of Buck's strongest advocates, arguing that the team should support Buck rather than question him. Jeff was more neutral, acknowledging he didn't know what happened but felt the network's handling of the situation was wrong, regardless of whether Buck's encounter was real. The division went beyond just believing or disbelieving Buck's story. It exposed deeper tensions about the show's authenticity, and what the cast owed each other versus what they owed the production. Some cast members prioritized protecting Mountain Monster's reputation and their own financial interests, viewing Buck's story as a liability that could jeopardize everyone's paychecks if it went public. Others felt that loyalty to a team member who was genuinely suffering should outweigh business concerns. Filming became awkward and tense, with unresolved conflicts simmering beneath every investigation. Buck felt increasingly isolated, dealing with chronic pain and addiction while surrounded by people who either didn't believe him or wanted him to stay quiet for the good of the show. What producers and cast members didn't know was that Buck had collected physical evidence from the encounter site that he'd kept hidden for years, waiting for the right time to reveal proof that would validate his story. In the chaotic aftermath of his accident, while waiting for emergency responders, Buck used his phone to photograph massive footprints he could see from where he lay injured on the ground. The prints were approximately 18 inches long, deeply impressed in the soft earth near where the creature had been standing, showing clear toe definition and dermal ridges that Buck knew were consistent with alleged Bigfoot tracks documented by researchers. He took over a dozen photos from different angles despite excruciating pain, knowing these images might be his only evidence of what had really happened. Buck also recorded audio on his phone during those terrifying 20 minutes before help arrived. The recording captures his labored breathing, groans of pain, and most importantly, distant vocalizations from the creature that had apparently remained in the area after Buck crashed. The sounds are deep, guttural, and unlike any known wildlife in West Virginia. Audio analysis experts Buck later consulted privately confirmed the vocalizations didn't match bear, elk, or any other animal native to Appalachia. Before emergency crews arrived, Buck managed to crawl several feet to collect physical evidence. Tufts of dark hair caught on vegetation where the creature had crashed through the brush. He stuffed the hair samples into his jacket pocket, protecting them even as paramedics worked on him. Buck had the samples analyzed by a private laboratory under a false name, paying cash to avoid any paper trail that might alert producers. The lab results showed primate hair with characteristics inconsistent with any known ape species, though the lab couldn't definitively identify the source. The most compelling evidence Buck preserved was the actual location data and timestamps from his phone proving exactly when and where the encounter occurred. GPS coordinates, photo metadata, and cell tower records document his position at the time of the accident, allowing independent verification that he was exactly where he claimed to be. Buck kept all this evidence hidden for years, stored in a secure location known only to his closest family members, waiting until he was legally free to reveal it without violating his non-disclosure agreements with the network. Buck's decision to permanently leave Mountain Monsters and finally reveal the truth about his Bigfoot encounter represents a complete transformation from the person who once prioritized television fame and paychecks over personal integrity. His journey through addiction recovery provided the clarity and courage necessary to walk away from the show and face the consequences of telling a story the network desperately wants to remain buried. Buck completed his final contracted episodes in 2023 while counting down the days until his non-disclosure agreements would expire. Every moment of filming felt dishonest and unbearable now that he'd achieved sobriety and could no longer use substances to numb the guilt of lying about his experience. He watched producers stage evidence and script encounters while sitting on proof of a genuine cryptid interaction that was being actively suppressed. The hypocrisy became too much to tolerate. In early 2025, when his legal restrictions finally expired, Buck made the definitive choice to tell his story regardless of professional and financial consequences. He's prepared for lawsuits from the network claiming he's violating the spirit of his agreements even if technically legal restrictions have lapsed. He's accepted that speaking out means he'll never work in paranormal television again and that many people will dismiss his claims as attention-seeking fabrication. But Buck has come to believe that his recovery and continued sobriety depend on living authentically and telling the truth about what happened to him. The lies were literally making him sick, contributing to depression and anxiety that threatened his hard-won sobriety. Buck's plans for revealing his evidence are deliberate and strategic. He's partnering with credible Bigfoot researchers and wildlife biologists to analyze and present his photos, audio recordings, and physical samples in a way that withstands scientific scrutiny. He's considering publishing a book that tells the complete story of his encounter, the network cover-up, and his struggle with addiction and recovery. Most importantly, Buck wants his story to validate other people who've had genuine cryptid encounters but remained silent due to fear of ridicule or professional consequences. He hopes that by coming forward with evidence and accepting the personal costs of honesty, he can encourage others to share their experiences and contribute to legitimate cryptozoological research rather than entertainment television's staged fakery. Buck Lowe has hunted the Appalachian Mountains for 30 years, tracked every animal in West Virginia: bear, deer, cougar. He grew up hearing his grandfather's stories about something else in those woods, something that walks on two legs, something 9 feet tall. Buck respected the stories but never truly believed. Until October 2023 in the Tiggart Valley. 20 feet away from him stood a creature covered in dark hair, 9 feet tall, looking directly at him with eyes that reflected his flashlight. Bigfoot was real, and Buck's reaction was captured on camera. Subscribe because what happened next will give you chills. His voice shaking, hands trembling, pure fear documented. The thermal cameras captured it too. A massive heat signature right where Buck said, "This isn't acting, this is genuine terror." This is Buck Lowe face to face with Bigfoot, and his reaction changes everything. The Tiggart Valley sits deep in Randolph County, West Virginia, in the heart of Appalachian territory. Dense forest covers steep terrain for miles. The nearest town is 40 minutes away on winding mountain roads. Locals call one particular area the Dark Hollow because sunlight barely penetrates the thick canopy. This region has a history. Native American legends speak of wild men living in these mountains. Sightings date back to the 1800s when settlers first moved through the area. In September 2023, multiple recent reports reached local authorities. Hunters discovered massive footprints near creek beds. A local farmer named Dale Henderson lost 3 calves in 1 week, killed in an unusual manner that didn't match bear or cougar attacks. The tracks found near his property measured 18 inches long. Tree structures appeared overnight, branches and logs arranged in deliberate patterns that weren't natural. Campers reported strange vocalizations echoing through the valley at night, deep guttural sounds that didn't match any known animal. Dale Henderson contacted the Ames team directly. "Something's out here and it ain't natural," he told Buck over the phone. Dale described seeing a large figure crossing his field at dusk, moving upright on 2 legs. He estimated the height at 8 to 9 feet. It was covered in dark hair and moved with surprising speed despite its massive size. 2 other locals confirmed similar sightings in the same area within the past month. Buck Lowe studied the reports carefully. He examined topographical maps of the region, identifying likely travel corridors for a large creature, water sources where it might drink, caves and rock overhangs that could provide shelter. Buck's 30 years of tracking experience told him this was textbook Bigfoot territory. Dense cover, multiple water sources, abundant food, and minimal human presence. The team assembled for the investigation. Buck would lead as team leader, the role he took after Trapper's passing. Wild Bill served as second in command. Huckleberry handled tech and thermal imaging equipment. Jeff Headley provided historical research. Willie McQuillian filmed everything. They brought full equipment, thermal imaging cameras, night vision, audio recorders, and trail cameras. The plan was straightforward. Split into 2 groups for better coverage. Buck, Wild Bill, and Willie would take the North Ridge. Huckleberry and Jeff would approach from the South Valley. They'd coordinate via radio, set up thermal monitoring stations, and use calls to elicit responses from any creatures in the area. The rendezvous point was base camp by midnight. October weather provided perfect conditions. Temperature in the 40s, clear sky, nearly full moon. Good visibility, but cold enough to keep animals active. Buck felt optimistic as they geared up. "If it's out here, we'll find it tonight." At 7:30 p.m., the teams split at the trailhead. Buck's group headed north into dense forest, climbing the steep ridgeline. Huckleberry's team took the lower valley route. Radio check confirmed communication was working. "Stay sharp, stay together," Buck said before they separated. By 8:15, Buck's group found fresh tracks crossing a muddy section of trail, clearly bipedal with 5 toes. The prints measured 17 inches long and 7 inches wide. Stride length suggested 6 to 7 foot steps. Too large for human, too humanoid for bear. Buck examined them closely. These are fresh, maybe an hour old. The trail led deeper into forest, away from established paths. Buck used his tracking skills, noting broken branches at 7 to 8 foot height. Something large had passed through recently. The brush was still bent. Wild Bill followed close behind. Whatever made these is big. At 8:45, they discovered a tree structure. logs and branches arranged in a deliberate teepee formation, fresh breaks on the branches. This was a classic Bigfoot territorial marker. "This is what we've been looking for," Buck said. Willie captured everything on camera. Huckleberry radioed from the south team. They were hearing strange vocalizations echoing through the valley, deep, guttural sounds. Not coyote, not wolf, coming from Buck's direction. "Whatever's up there knows you're there," Huckleberry warned. By 9:10, the tracks led uphill toward the ridge into even denser forest. Visibility was decreasing. Wild Bill suggested turning back, but Buck wanted to continue. "We're close. I can feel it." The terrain changed to rocky outcroppings with large boulders creating a maze. Caves and crevices everywhere, perfect hiding spots for something massive. At 9:35, Buck made a decision. He would scout ahead alone to check a cave entrance. "Give me 5 minutes," he told the team. Wild Bill was reluctant, but agreed. Willie filmed as Buck disappeared into the darkness with only his flashlight. What happened next would change Buck's life forever. At 9:38 p.m., Buck moved alone toward a large cave opening. His flashlight beam swept across rocks, searching for signs of habitation, hair samples, scat, anything. Years of hunting experience guided every careful step. Then the smell hit him. Overwhelming musky odor like wet dog mixed with something wilder. Buck recognized it immediately. "Oh God, it's here," he whispered into his radio. He didn't wait for a response. The smell was getting stronger with each step toward the cave entrance. A sound stopped him cold. Deep, heavy breathing. Rhythmic and controlled. Coming from his left, not the cave, behind a large boulder. Buck froze completely. That breathing sounded intelligent, aware. Buck turned slowly and swung his flashlight left. The beam crossed trees, then caught something, a dark mass between the trunks, 20 feet away. His flashlight found it, and his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. The creature stood fully upright, massive, easily 9 feet tall, shoulders broader than any man, covered in dark brown, almost black hair. Arms hanging past its knees, but the face stopped Buck's breath. Less hair than the body, dark skin visible, flat nose, wide nostrils, prominent brow ridge, and the eyes. The eyes caught his flashlight and reflected back like animal eyeshine, yellowish amber, looking directly at Buck. Neither moved. Buck and the creature locked eyes. Buck's flashlight remained steady on its face. The creature didn't flinch from the light, just stared back. Buck could see its chest rising and falling with each breath. This wasn't a costume. This wasn't a man. This was something else, and Buck's hand began trembling. The flashlight beam shook. "Oh my God," he whispered. His legs wouldn't move. His heart pounded visibly in his chest. The camera 40 feet back captured everything. Buck's pure shock, his frozen stance, his trembling hands. The creature stood completely still. No aggression, no fear. Just observing Buck with intelligence in those amber eyes. Buck felt it studying him, thinking. 6 seconds felt like hours. Then the creature shifted its weight slightly and took 1 step sideways, never breaking eye contact, moving toward denser cover, and then it was gone. Willie's camera filmed from 40 feet back. He couldn't see what Buck saw in the darkness, but he captured Buck's reaction perfectly, and that's what matters. Buck's voice came through clearly on the audio. "Oh my God." Then again, "It's real. It's right there." His voice shaking, breaking, not acting, genuine shock. Years of skepticism shattered in seconds. The camera documented Buck's physical response. His knees buckled slightly. He caught himself stumbling. His flashlight dropped briefly and he scrambled to recover it. Even from 40 feet away, his hands were visibly shaking. Body language showed pure fear. Buck took a step backward and stumbled over a root, nearly falling. He caught himself on a tree but couldn't look away. His flashlight beam trembled violently. Every instinct screamed run, but Buck forced himself to stay. He reached for his radio with his left hand while keeping the flashlight on the creature. His hand shook too much. He dropped the radio. When he bent to pick it up and looked back up, the creature was gone. "No, no, no, where'd it go?" Panic filled his voice. He spun in circles, flashlight sweeping frantically. Wild Bill came running. "Buck, what happened?" He found Buck standing there, flashlight sweeping wildly. "It was right there," Buck pointed. 20 feet, Bill, 20 feet. "What was? What did you see?" Wild Bill asked. Buck's answer came tumbling out. "Bigfoot, Bill. I saw Bigfoot. 9 feet tall, covered in hair. It was looking at me, right in the eyes, Bill. It was real. It was right there." Wild Bill had known Buck for decades. He'd never seen him like this. Buck doesn't scare easily. Buck doesn't exaggerate. If Buck said he saw it, Wild Bill believed him completely. Okay, you're all right," Wild Bill said calmly, calling the rest of the team. Buck had to sit down on a rock. adrenaline crashing, legs weak, hands still shaking. "I've been hunting these things for years," he said quietly. "Always believed they were out here. But seeing one, that's different. That changes everything." Willie's primary camera footage shows Buck approaching the cave, his flashlight visible in the darkness. Then his posture changes suddenly. His entire body tenses. The flashlight beam focuses on one spot and holds there for several seconds. Then the reaction begins, all captured on film. The audio analysis reveals Buck's voice clearly recorded saying, "Oh my God," multiple times. Heavy breathing is audible. Radio fumbling sounds. But there's something else. A deep, low rumble. Not human. Not Buck. Something else was there. Huckleberry's thermal camera from the ridge shows Buck's heat signature clearly. And something else. A large heat signature appears near Buck behind the boulder area. It registers warmer than ambient temperature, suggesting a living mammal. The signature is roughly human-shaped but much larger, 8 to 9 feet tall, standing upright. The thermal shows both signatures stationary for several seconds. Then the larger one shifts position, moves left toward the trees, and disappears from thermal view. Too fast for something that size. "That's not a person," Huckleberry said. "Nothing moves like that." When Willie's footage is enhanced and slowed down, 1 or 2 frames show a dark mass visible between trees when Buck's flashlight swings. The figure appears too tall for a human with wrong proportions. Arms too long. 1 frame captures eye shine. Amber yellow coloring reflecting from Buck's flashlight at approximately 8 feet high. Not deer, wrong color. Not bear, wrong height. Not human, humans don't have eye shine. After the encounter, the team searched the area and found physical evidence. A ground depression where something heavy stood, measured 18 inches long with a partial print visible. Casts were made immediately. Hair samples were found on bark at 7-foot height. Dark brown, coarse texture. The hair was sent for analysis. Results came back. Primate, but not gorilla, not chimpanzee, not human. Unknown species. Buck led the team back to the exact spot an hour later. The musky odor was still present. The entire team confirmed the smell. "Like wet dog and something else," Wild Bill described it. "I've smelled bear before. This ain't bear." The next morning at base camp, Buck sat with coffee. His hands were steadier, but something had changed in him. The team gathered with cameras rolling to hear the full story. "I've hunted these mountains 30 years, Buck began. "Seen bear, cougar, everything. Nothing prepared me for that." He took a deep breath. "It was aware, you understand? Not like an animal, like something in between." Buck described the face in detail. The hair on its body was thick, but the face had less. Could see the skin, dark, leathery, but the eyes. He paused, getting emotional. The eyes looked intelligent. It was studying me. The emotional impact was clear. "I've never felt fear like that. Complete primal terror. Every instinct said run, but I couldn't move. Couldn't look away. It's like it held me there." His voice cracked slightly. The emotion was genuine. "I've dedicated years to this." Trapper believed. I believed. But seeing it, that's proof. Not just to others. Proof to myself. They're real. Buck admitted he didn't sleep that night. Keep seeing those eyes, wondering what it was thinking. Did it know I wouldn't hurt it? Is that why it just watched? So many questions. But I know what I saw. People can doubt the show, can say we're actors. But I know. I looked into its eyes, 20 feet away. That was real. Nothing can take that from me. Buck's message was clear. They're out there, living in these mountains, avoiding us mostly, but they're there. I'm proof now. I've seen one, and I'll never forget it. Then Buck got emotional talking about Trapper. Wish Trapper was here. He'd understand. He saw things too. Now I know what he felt. That mix of fear and wonder. Trapper. We were right. He had to pause, too overcome to continue. The interview captured a man fundamentally changed by what he witnessed. Buck Lowe wasn't acting. He was processing something that shattered everything he thought he knew about the world. Wild Bill has known Buck for 20 years. Never seen him scared. He was terrified. When I got to him, he was shaking. Couldn't talk straight. Whatever he saw was real. Buck doesn't fake that. Wild Bill described finding Buck standing frozen with his flashlight pointing at trees, saying, "It was right there. Over and over. I looked, didn't see nothing, but Buck saw something. No doubt in my mind." Huckleberry watched from the ridge on thermal. "I saw Buck's signature. Then this other signature appears. Bigger, warmer, standing near him. Both just standing there. Then the big one moves and disappears from thermal. Too fast, that shouldn't happen." Huckleberry's technical analysis was definitive. Heat signature was consistent with large primate. Body temperature higher than ambient, suggesting mammal. Size estimated 8 to 9 feet based on thermal reading. This wasn't equipment malfunction. This was something. Jeff Headley focused on the research. "This area has history, sightings going back decades. Native American legends. Buck's encounter fits the pattern. Location, behavior, description. Everything matches historical reports. This is textbook Bigfoot encounter. Jeff's conviction was strong. I've researched hundreds of cases. Buck's is among the most credible. Multiple forms of evidence, thermal, video, witness testimony, hair samples, footprints, all corroborating the same story. This is the real deal. Willie has filmed hundreds of episodes. Never caught Buck like that. That reaction was genuine. You can't fake that fear. The way his voice shook, his hands trembling, that was real terror. Willie's perspective was unique. I couldn't see what Buck saw. Too dark, too far. But I saw him, saw his reaction. That's the proof. Buck Lowe doesn't scare. Whatever he saw scared him. That tells you everything. The team reached consensus. We all believe Buck. The evidence supports him. Thermal shows something there. Video shows his reaction. Physical evidence matches. This was a real encounter. No doubt among the team. This encounter validated years of work and proved what Trapper always believed. They're really out there. When the episode aired, social media exploded. #BuckSawBigfoot trended immediately. Millions of views within hours. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. The paranormal community divided sharply. Believers responded enthusiastically. Finally, proof! Buck's reaction says everything. You can't fake that fear. The thermal evidence convinced many. Bigfoot researchers analyzed the footage frame by frame. This is the best evidence yet, many declared. Believers pointed to Buck's credibility, 30 years of hunting experience, not prone to exaggeration. His genuine fear was documented, physical shaking visible on camera. The thermal signature provided independent verification. Hair sample analysis showed unknown primate. Everything aligned perfectly. Skeptics argued differently. Reality TV is scripted. Buck's an actor playing a role. Producers told him what to do. They questioned the thermal readings. Could be faked or misinterpreted. The hair sample results were dismissed as contamination. Convenient that there's no clear footage of the creature itself. The skeptics' main complaint focused on the lack of clear images. If it was 20 feet away, why no clear photo? Convenient darkness. Convenient camera angle. Just Buck's reaction and a thermal blob. They demanded better evidence. Believers countered logically. The creature was in shadows. Buck's flashlight wasn't powerful enough for clear photography. The camera was 40 feet back, not in position. Buck didn't have a camera himself. He wasn't prepared for the encounter. This is what a real encounter looks like, not a documentary setup. Even skeptics admitted Buck's reaction seemed genuine. Either he saw something real, or he's an Oscar-worthy actor. Body language experts analyzed the footage. Genuine fear response. Can't fake those micro-expressions. Pupil dilation visible. Voice stress analysis indicates truth. Thermal experts confirmed. Signature is consistent with large primate. The middle ground emerged. Buck saw something. Maybe not Bigfoot, but something scared him genuinely. The encounter itself was real. The identity of the creature remains debatable. This encounter stands out among Bigfoot evidence. Multiple evidence types. Credible witness, documented reaction, technical data, physical samples, historical context. Even serious skeptics take it seriously. Buck couldn't sleep for days after the encounter. He kept replaying the moment, seeing those amber eyes every time he closed his own. The nightmares eventually faded, but the memory never did. The experience changed his entire perspective on hunting. Buck approaches investigations differently now, more cautious, hyper-aware of surroundings. I know they're watching. I know they're intelligent. They're not just cryptids. They're living, thinking beings that deserve respect. The encounter strengthened his relationship with the team. They validated him without question, supported him completely. That's family, Buck says. The shared mission was renewed with greater purpose. Buck feels closer to Trapper now. I understand what he experienced, the weight of knowing. Trapper saw things too. Now I know what he carried. That knowledge, that certainty, it changes you. The connection to Trapper's memory makes the work more meaningful. As team leader, Buck has more confidence. I know we're pursuing real creatures, not just legends, real beings. That makes everything we do matter. It honors Trapper's memory and validates years of effort. Public perception doesn't concern Buck anymore. Some mock him, some believe him. I don't care. I know what I saw. Don't need anyone's approval. I was there, 20 feet away. His confidence is unshakable. Buck's message to others is clear. They're out there. I'm living proof. I looked one in the eyes. If you spend time in deep woods, respect what's there. You're in their territory. They're watching you. The experience reevaluated Buck's priorities. This work matters. Finding truth matters. If they exist, They need protection from people who'd hurt or exploit them. Education, not exploitation. They're not monsters, just creatures trying to survive. 1 year later, Buck reflects on October 2023. Changed my life, before and after that night. Before I believed, after I knew. That's everything. He gets emotional. People can doubt. People can mock. I don't care. I was there, 20 feet away, looked into its eyes. It looked back. That's mine. Nobody can take that. His voice breaks. Those eyes. I'll never forget those eyes.